Hello, everyone. This is Ross Carpri with Keller Williams Metro South again, coming to you. We're going to discuss some things on the purchasing side that affects the buyer and the seller. And I've got Andy Gagliano on the line with us as well from Gagliano Mortgage. He's going to kind of touch on a few things from his side of the fence that shows how lenders look at certain situations. When you're purchasing a home, there's a lot of things that can go right. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. So what I want to try to do is point out today some of the hurdles and stepping stones that we have to do when you're purchasing a home. Now, first of all, y'all know that anytime you're going to purchase a home, you have to be pre-approved with a lender. And what that basically does from years past, what it basically does now is it lets that seller know when you make an offer on their property, it lets them know that this person has the ability to purchase my house. I've got this letter from a lending company that says John Doe and his wife can purchase this home based on sales price of X. And that's good to have. Now, behind the scenes, and when you dig down deep into it as you go through the process, there's a lot of things that have to take place. First of all, when you make an offer, you present the letter. And the reason you have to present the letter when you make an offer on a house, seller is looking at several offers probably. Let's just say he's got 3 offers on his house. Every one of them are going to have some kind of financial approval, whether it be cash, whether it be financing, whether it be a gift from a family member, any of those. Seller has to look at all those and say, okay, which one of these scenarios am I best suited for? Most of the time, people say cash is king, and cash usually dictates if the offer price is right. Let's just assume all 3 offers are for the same exact amount. One's cash, one's financing, one's a gift from a family member. Well, normally you would think cash is king because what it does for the seller is he probably doesn't have to have the house appraised unless the buyer requests it. There's no lender involved. There's no one else forcing that buyer or seller to have an appraisal done. Okay, it's kind of a mutual agreement. Second of all, if it's cash, you probably not having a lot of lenders will require certain repairs maybe that might need to be made. That affects the seller's bottom line as well. And that's why typically people think that cash is the best avenue because it kind of has less people interfering with what needs to be done to purchase a home. But you can also get to a point where you have the house inspected and let's say there's a lot of repairs that need to be made. And you as a buyer say, well, I really like for him to fix this, and this. But if he doesn't want to fix it before closing, if the seller will give me X amount of dollars as a credit, then I'll be okay with that. And people do that all the time. The problem you run into is some buyers might want a little more than it's worth. They might want a little more repairs than the seller's willing to pay. You still have things you have to agree on. So that's why we kind of say, typically cash is king, but there are conditions that might make that cash offer not as impressive to the seller as a finance one. Somebody that puts in an offer for a finance that has to have financing may say, you know what, I don't want any repairs. I saw the house. The house looks great. I don't need any repairs to be done. I'll have it inspected and see if they find something major. But if it's not major, I'm not going to ask you to do any repairs. Well, that's very attractive to a seller because they don't want to have to go in knowing that there's a possibility that I might have to spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on repairs. I really don't want to do that. So there's a lot of little different things that can happen, whether it's cash, financed, or a gift from a family member. Now, Andy can shed the light on a gift from a family member, but there's certain things that you have to do when you have a family or parent or couple or whatever that wants to gift a down payment, the full amount or whatever for a house. And there's certain restrictions that you have to go by according to the laws that Andy can shed some light on with that. But just know that whenever you're purchasing a home, what we try to do as agents is to get you lined up for the best possible chance to buy that home. And we try to instruct you and guide you throughout the process so that we don't run into any problems midstream. And we want to have a smooth closing. That's what our job is. So, just know that there's several ways to purchase a home. There's a lot of things that can happen to keep you from getting the home, and there's a lot of things that can happen to enable you to buy a home. So that's why I say if you've got any questions about any of that, we can go into detail further. You can call me at 205-601-0123. We'll discuss your individual situation and try to come up with the best plan for you and your family to make it a smooth transition. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy. Maybe he can shed some light from his side of the industry and see if we can help you from that standpoint as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ross. I appreciate you having me on again today. And yeah, the pre-approval letters, we get requests for those all the time because they're really a standard part of the process these days when a buyer is making an offer on a piece of real estate. And it makes perfectly good sense that a seller would want to know that the buyer of the property that they're selling is qualified to buy it, because if that seller gets the property tied up with a buyer for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and then the financing falls through, then that's time that property has been off the market when it could have sold to someone else. So the pre-approval letters put the sellers a little bit at ease to know that this buyer that's presenting this offer is qualified to buy a home. And in a situation where you have multiple offers coming in at the same time, that pre-approval letter really can be the difference in choosing offer A or choosing offer B. As a buyer, getting your offer accepted. As a seller, making sure that you're choosing the most qualified buyers, and maybe the buyer that's going to end up netting you the most money from your sale as well. So those pre-approval letters are essential when it comes to making an offer on a property. Now, we're going to get to the real world. As much as it pains me to say it, most pre-approval letters are not worth the paper that they're written on. And the reason that I say that is because that pre-approval letter is effectively saying, as of today, based on the information that we, the mortgage company, have on the buyer, this buyer is qualified to buy a home. Well, that's fine and dandy. That means that we've looked at the buyer's qualifications and determined that that buyer's qualified. But if something comes up in our future investigation on this buyer, in other words, that buyer's not had title done, and or the seller's not had the title done on the property, and the buyer's not been looked at by the title company as well, because they haven't put an offer on a property up to that point in time. But let's say the title comes back and it says, hey, the title company says, hey, your buyer has judgments against them for $50,000. And those judgments came from a car accident, and they were sued and they lost, and their insurance company didn't pay, and maybe they didn't have insurance. And so they're responsible for paying this $50,000 judgment. Well, that's something that comes up once the listing agent orders the title insurance to the property. Is something that comes up after the property is under contract, after we, the mortgage company, have issued a pre-approval letter, but it's something we didn't know anything about. And so, because that's something that can affect the lenders, that's something that can affect our position on that piece of property, to where the person who has that judgment holds that judgment against the buyer, their lien can take priority over our lien. We're not going to do that loan until that judgment's settled. So that's just an example of showing how a pre-approval letter can be issued today and then be basically null and void tomorrow.
Right.
But those letters are still important. I don't mean to downplay the importance of the letters. They're still very, very important. So with all of that said, we try to, with our pre-approval letters, let the seller know what kind of financing the buyer's trying to get, because that may affect their decision as to which offer they take if there are multiple offers coming in. Right. You know, and Ross alluded to this some. And so that's something about those pre-approval letters that's very important. Also, our pre-approval letters state how much money the buyer is going to borrow, the loan amount, because typically, is not always the case, but typically, if a buyer is putting down more money, it's generally easier for that buyer to be able to get financing. If they only need to borrow 50% of the sales price on a mortgage, generally that's going to be an easier mortgage for that buyer to get compared to someone who wants to get 100% or 97% financing for that home. So those are things that are important that a seller needs to look at as well. So, you know, just kind of in summary, the pre-approval process is extremely important as a buyer. It's extremely important as a seller that the seller pays attention to these pre-approval letters and asks some questions. Ask the question of your realtor. Hey, I've got two pre-approval letters. I've got one from XYZ Mortgage Company, who's a local lender, and I've got one from ABC Mortgage Company, who's a national lender. Have you dealt with both of these lenders before?
Right.
If so, is one better than the other in your opinion? Have you dealt with these loan officers before? Have you dealt with an FHA contract, a VA contract? What's required of a seller for a buyer who's getting a VA loan or an FHA loan? So it's important to ask those questions. It's important to read that pre-approval letter when you're a seller. And so, you know, I contradicted myself a little bit in what I was saying by saying that the pre-approval letters aren't worth the paper they're written on. But there again, I'm saying they are an extremely important document. They're really, I'm not going to say the roadmap, they're more or less the key to the map. That pre-approval letter is what describes how the buyer is going to get from, hey, I want to buy your home, to, oh, great, we're sitting at the closing table and this deal is going to close.
Right.
So it's important, you know, important enough where Ross and I thought we should do a video on it. And it's something that I think a lot of sellers don't understand, and a lot of buyers don't understand why they really need that letter. But they're an important part of the process. So hopefully,
well, it's just like, and it's just like you said before, in that scenario where they get a pre-approval letter and it's not worth the paper it's printed on. If you dig down deep behind the scenes in that buyer and find a judgment or a lien or a bankruptcy that you didn't know about, then that letter is not any good. But if you know, that basically is kind of like a small window to that buyer's ability to purchase. And once you open the window up and go in, it may be that he's very well qualified, or it may be there's some things that might be found that maybe people forgot about. You know, things happen to people that may have happened 15 years ago, and he didn't even know it showed up on his record. And it was like, man, I thought I paid that off, you know, and you get into all that. So it is kind of what you said about not being worth the paper it's on, but it's part of the process. It's necessary. We'll find out as we dig into the financing if this paper is really going to be valid or not. And that's part of it. And that's what we have to do. You have to go into it knowing or have an idea of this person's ability to buy. Now, of course, as you as a lender dig down deep into their finances down the road, you may find something different. It may be better than what you thought. It may be worse than what you thought. That's part of the process. And that's why, people need myself and Andy to guide you through that, help you through it. If there's a bump in the road, we help you get over it. If we can't get over it, then we have to figure out another alternative. But these things are very necessary, and it's all part of the process of buying a home. That's why, when you're purchasing a home, you can't expect this to happen in 20 days, 30 days, or whatever, because there's a lot that's involved, a lot of research, a lot of data gathering. And we want to make sure that we do it right. We want to make sure we cover all the bases so that when we do sit down at the closing table finally, then we'll have a better understanding and a better comfort feeling knowing that this house is going to close today. We're not going to have any questions come up at the 11th hour of something that came, that popped up we didn't know about. So that's our goal, to make it smooth and easy. It takes a lot of work to do that, but between Andy and myself, there's enough years of experience there to make it happen. So,
yeah, very true. And one last thing I'll throw out there, and it's something a lot of sellers don't think about, is that there's two parts to a mortgage approval. One part is the buyer's qualifications. The other part is your property's qualifications. And if an appraisal is done and that appraisal notes deficiencies in your property, or if the value is not sufficient on that appraisal, that can kill the buyer's financing.
absolutely.
So it's not all based on the buyer. Some of it falls back on the seller as well to be able to get that deal to the closing table. So it's an important part of the process.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome. Well, look, man, thank you so much for your time, as always. Very
Thank you.
informative. And folks, again, if you have any questions for me, I'm at 205-601-0123. I'll let Andy give you his numbers, and you can get in touch with either one of us.
Yeah, I can be reached at 205-979-4412. I'm at extension 1. Happy to help in any way I can.
Perfect.
So,
all right, Andy. Well, thank you so much, man, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds great. Have a great week.
You too.
All right.